Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Madam Attorney General, let me ask you this question. Were you consulted by the White House before they deployed National Guard troops to cities in the United States?
I am not going to discuss any internal conversations with the White House.
You won't even say whether you talked to the White House about this?
I am not going to discuss any internal conversations with the White House with you, Ranking Member.
I noticed that. What's the secret? Why do you want to keep this secret? The American people don't know the rationale behind the deployment of National Guard troops in my state. The word is, and I think it's been confirmed by the White House, they are going to transfer Texas National Guard units to the state of Illinois. What's the rationale for that?
Yeah, Chairman, as you shut down the government, you voted to shut down the government, and you're sitting here, our law enforcement officers aren't being paid. They're out there working to protect you. I wish you loved Chicago as much as you hate President Trump. And currently, the National Guard are on the way to Chicago. If you're not going to protect your citizens, President Trump will.
Been on this committee for more than 20 years. That's the kind of testimony you expect from this administration. A simple question as to whether or not they had a legal rationale for deploying National Guard troops becomes grounds for a personal attack. I think it's a legitimate question. It's my responsibility. She refuses to answer as to whether she had any conversation with the White House about deploying national troops to my state. That's an indication, I'm afraid, where we are politically in this place.
Wow, that exchange really says a lot about where we are right now as a country. A sitting senator asks a pretty simple oversight question, one well within their rights to ask as a legislator conducting official oversight, one of their constitutional duties. Did the Department of Justice talk to the White House about a major domestic deployment of force? Public deserves a yes or no answer to that question. But instead of a straight answer, what we got was a wall of politics. And that's really the moment that we should start to ask, what does transparency in government actually mean? And why does it matter to the rest of us who live far away from D.C.? Well, what transparency is and why it matters most at DOJ among all executive branch agencies, transparency isn't about embarrassing politicians. It isn't about gotcha questions. It isn't about trying to catch people in a lie. Transparency isn't just some ideal that we should hope to achieve. Transparency is a fundamental element of a fully functioning democracy. It's about making sure power is exercised under law and not under loyalty to any one individual, office, or institution. The Department of Justice really holds one of the toughest dual mandates in government. They need to enforce law independently while also being accountable to elected officials through these oversight hearings. They have to ensure that our laws are enforced, but also that that enforcement occurs in a manner that's consistent with the Constitution. Now, that balance only works if the public, the people, can see how decisions are made. We actually have visibility into that process. And of course, that all has to happen within the limits of ongoing cases, right? That is, without violating somebody's due process or hurting an investigation by revealing too many details. But that's not what was going on in this question. So a little history lesson here. After the Watergate scandal back in the early 70s, in which the president of the U.S. was wielding the power of the executive branch, using institutions like the CIA to meddle in domestic criminal affairs on his behalf, Congress passed reforms to keep political influence out of criminal prosecution. So some of those reforms introduced special counsels, that's where those come from, departmental inspector general reports, that's where those come from, as well as things like the Freedom of Information Act, among other reforms. And each of these reforms were designed in a way so that the next attorney general couldn't simply say, trust me, right, and dodge questions while Congress was using their oversight duty or enforcing their oversight duty. And of course, transparency, especially at the Department of Justice, when you're talking about criminal cases and enforcing the law, transparency is hard, but it's also essential. And every single administration, when they come to power, they say they value transparency. They say they're going to be the most transparent administration ever. Both parties do this, right? But it's somewhat of a cliche at this point it's something that every administration recognizes as crucial to American democracy. Even the Trump administration right now, they love to tell people they're the most transparent administration in American history, right? Let's set aside for a moment the debate over whether or not that's true. But every single administration also finds reasons to keep things quiet, whether it's national security concerns, executive privilege over investigative materials, ongoing investigations necessitating people staying quiet, whatever it may be, they all find ways to sort of skirt transparency in one way or the other. Now, of course, some secrecy is legitimate, and there are real-world implications for certain pieces of information entering the public realm, especially when we are talking about national security concerns. But the real test is whether those claims serve the public interest or political convenience. Whether the secrecy that's going on is because there is a real national interest at stake, or the secrecy is there because someone wielding power doesn't want something to get out, thinking it'll damage them, damage their reputation, harm them politically, whatever it may be. That is not a legitimate reason for an agency to be less than transparent. So when officials refuse to confirm even whether they discussed a policy with the White House, especially a policy like this, deploying federal troops to enforce domestic law, that line between law enforcement and politics blurs dramatically. And that line between politics and the enforcement of law is the very foundation of the rule of law in a fully functioning democracy. We can't be enforcing laws based on political priorities. Ultimately, independence at an agency like the DOJ, it doesn't just mean isolation. That's not what independence means. It means making legal calls based on statutes, laws, facts, not making decisions based on partisan pressure or based on loyalty to an individual. It means a political figure should not be guiding law enforcement activity, ultimately. And that's why historically, the president typically stays out of any DOJ affairs. They don't make recommendations over who to go after, who to file an indictment against, or who to open up an investigation into. There's a reason why presidents don't do that until this one. Now, transparency isn't just about hearings either. It's also about information that the government releases near daily. We get jobs numbers, unemployment numbers, inflation reports, farm forecasts, climate data, weather forecasts, crime statistics, so on and so forth, right? The government pumps out tons of data all the time. And then when the government shuts down, like it is right this moment, many of those data pipelines just stop. The Bureau of Labor Statistics pauses unemployment updates. The Department of Agriculture stops crop reporting surveys. The Bureau of Economic Analysis halts the GDP and personal income reports. Without that information, local banks, co-ops, county planners, they're all flying blind. They rely on those sources of data. Many downstream policy decisions are made using information gleaned from those sources. And so if you really think about it, it's the same principle as the DOJ oversight, right? Sunlight lets everyone make decisions based on reality, not rumor. A shutdown benefits nefarious actors who otherwise don't want certain pieces of data to get out. And there's any number of agencies to which that may apply. So when that transparency erodes, two things happen. First, public trust in institutions collapses. People assume that every closed door is hiding some type of corruption, even when it's not. More and more people become skeptical of what government is saying and doing, even if there isn't really a rational reason for that skepticism. And of course, healthy skepticism is always good. I'm a proponent of that, but government should strive to maintain trust as much as possible. Second, bad decisions end up multiplying. If agencies hide data, businesses can't plan properly. If prosecutors are hiding reasoning around why they're doing what they're doing, laws look arbitrary. Businesses make poor choices about how to operate. Some people just start ignoring laws that they don't like or don't think that should exist. And when one agency gets away with flouting the law, other agencies see that happening too. And they say, well, maybe we can get away with some of that as well. And that's why hearings like the one we saw matter. That's why the hearings like the oversight hearing from the Judiciary Committee, where they brought Pam Bondi in today, why that matters. They're uncomfortable on purpose. They remind officials that public service isn't supposed to be just convenient. and easy. It's not done on the behalf of an individual or a party. Public service is supposed to be difficult and high stakes. You may have heard this before. It was popularized in the aftermath of the Watergate scandal, but democracy dies in darkness, but it weakens first in silence. So where do we go from here? How do we rebuild transparency and independence once they've been eroded? The fixes really aren't that complicated, but they are politically inconvenient. And like so much of public service, they're difficult. But just a couple of ideas here. We could further fund and enforce the Freedom of Information Act deadlines, so records requests don't just vanish in a backlog, allowing information to remain hidden. We could protect inspectors general from firing without cause, requiring detailed reasoning around their dismissal. We can avoid interference in an otherwise inconvenient investigation. We could require agencies to publish economic indicators on an automated schedule, even during shutdowns like right now, and provide a funding mechanism to ensure that happens, which would ultimately remove that incentive to shut the government down for a reason of hiding data. We could clarify that the Attorney General must answer oversight questions about policy coordination in particular, right? Not revealing classified details of an ongoing investigation per se, but requiring them to answer any questions surrounding the legal reasoning for actions that the Department of Justice takes, which ultimately the taxpayers pay for. And what this all boils down to, transparency isn't a partisan talking point. It isn't something we should only worry about when one party or the other is in office. It's really the basic warranty that government comes with. It's the oxygen that a fully functional democracy needs to breathe and to live. It's a necessary, albeit insufficient on its own, element of democracy. And without it, there are no reasonable expectations that the public trusts their government. So the concern of the Judiciary Committee hearing today, in which Attorney General Pam Bondi displayed not just a lack of transparency, but even downright contempt for the overall oversight process, isn't about one Attorney General. It isn't about President Trump or this administration. It's concerning when any agency head from any administration behaves this way. And at the end of the day, it's about whether the public still gets straight answers from the people who work from them, from the people who work for us. So let's hope those in charge can figure this out sooner than later, put us back on the right track so we can all maybe feel a little bit more confident in our ability to trust elected officials. But sadly, I think we may just be way out in the deep end on this as a country. So make sure to like and subscribe to our podcast feed, whatever podcast app you use. Make sure you head over to YouTube, subscribe to our channel over there too. Until next time, this is Kellen from 3 Rural White Guys.